Welcome back to another episode of the Frustrated CEO podcast. Thank you for tuning in again. My name is Patrick Lyons. I'm one of your co-hosts today. I'm here with my co-hosts, Patsy Feeman. Welcome to you.
Thanks, Patrick.
And our other partner in crime, Leb Tannenbaum. Leb, hello, sir. How are you?
I'm great. Glad to be here.
Good. Good to have you. Today, we're going to be talking about building winning organizations. And to help us do that, we have a guest, Randy Mueller. Randy is an American football executive who currently serves as the director of pro personnel for the Seattle Dragons of the XFL. Now, Randy previously served as the vice president of football operations for the NFL Seattle Seahawks, and then followed that up with general manager for the Miami Dolphins and the New Orleans Saints. Randy's got 2 decades in NFL front offices, and has worked with some of the greatest players and coaches in the NFL. In 2000, during Randy's first year with the New Orleans Saints, he won NFL Executive of the Year for leading them to their first NFL playoff win in franchise history. I can't wait to talk about that, dig into that a little bit when we get into our conversation. Now today, as I mentioned, Randy's here to help us talk about building winning organizations, because we believe that the characteristics that make winning football teams are no different from the characteristics that make winning businesses. So Randy Mueller, thank you for joining us today, and welcome to the Frustrated CEO podcast.
It is my pleasure. I'm glad to be on with you guys, and anxious to talk a little bit of football, but also some of the things, like you said, that carry over into the real business world. So I'm anxious to get some give and take from you guys as well.
Yeah, you bet.
Right.
Now, Randy, before you started your career in NFL front offices, you were, I happen to know this, you were the starting quarterback for the Linfield University Wildcats. For our listener who's not familiar with Linfield University, Linfield deserves to be mentioned in our conversation today because it absolutely falls under the category of winning organizations. Linfield has a current streak of 65 consecutive seasons without a losing record, which is by far the longest in American football at any level, D1, D2, D3. And if you don't think that that's relevant, ESPN ranked Linfield number 35 on their list of the top 50 college football programs of the last 150 years, ahead of bigger name programs like Wisconsin, Stanford, and Virginia Tech. So Randy, you obviously contributed 4 of those 65 winning seasons in a row. You won the 1982 Division II National Championship with Linfield, and you were named MVP of that title game.
Oh,
I know, right?
You guys are going way back now. You had to dig deep for that, Patrick.
I did my homework.
Okay.
So what did you learn about winning organizations at Linfield, playing for legendary coach Ad Rutschman, that either contributed to your success or would be relevant to our listener today?
Well, I don't even know where to start with that question because there's so much, right? I grew up in a little logging town in northern Idaho, 2,000 people, not a stoplight in town, never will be a stoplight. Trust me, it's not going to happen. And Linfield kind of found me. I didn't know about Linfield. I'd actually signed up to go to Pacific in Forest Grove, another small school just outside of Portland. I had already committed to going there when Ad Rutschman, the coach, the Hall of Fame coach from Linfield, had me come in and meet him and his son in Spokane one time when they were up there coaching baseball. Mind you, this is my senior year of high school. So I came in, I met with them. Obviously, I was impressed. They kind of, showed me a way from a little logging town in Idaho to maybe a chance to play for a national championship someday. And they kind of sold me on that. Now, I could have gone on to Pacific and probably played as a freshman. But I ended up changing my commitment and went to Linfield. And here's the kind of decision it was for me. If I had gone to Pacific, I think they won like 5 games in 4 years at Pacific. And I went to Linfield. I lost 5 games in 4 years. So it was probably the biggest decision I ever made, the best decision I ever made. But as an 18-year-old, sometimes you got to be lucky too. And it worked out good for me. But having said that, my time at Linfield was much more than time spent playing football. I think the things that I came away with most, and I had success in athletics, even as a kid. I mean, even as a 12-year-old, we won the state championship in Idaho as a Little League player. So all along there's a lot of winning, right? And I think that is contagious, and leadership comes with that. But the Linfield experience for me was, hey, we're going to teach you the things character wise, the things work ethic wise, the things that are going to help you no matter what you do. And the reason I went there is that coaches there convinced me that even if you come here and you never play a down of football, this is going to be a great experience for you because of all the winning, because of all the other things. They said, you can try to duplicate this somewhere, but that sold me, right? I wanted to go win. And I knew that if I won enough, that whatever it was, if I was just a small part of it, it would help me throughout life. I knew I wasn't an NFL player. I knew I wasn't a professional athlete. I was 5'10". I knew that wasn't going to happen. So I just wanted to go be a part of a winning program per se, and be a sponge and learn as much as I could. So they taught not only leadership, but they taught me how to kind of transfer from being a kid to an adult, how to reach people's hands, how to shake hands with people, the littlest of things, how to look people in the eye, how to treat people, how to listen to people, how to build consensus. All these things really, yeah, they're involved with football, but they're involved in life. And so the things I came away with after 4 years at Linfield really helped me more with life than it did with football. And I was just lucky that I got to use those in going to the Seahawks the very next week after I graduated as a full-time employee. So it was crazy, but again, lucky, better to be lucky than good, Patsy, right? So
being good probably helps too, Randy.
Yeah. That was kind of my story and kind of how I got assimilated in that culture. And you're right, 65 years of winning. I don't care if that's tiddlywinks. That's a lot of winning. And I think that it does rub off on you and the people around you.
I was going to ask, so how much of that coming out of a winning culture, winning the national championship, how much did that raise your own personal brand, your own personal stock, as you're now talking to the Seahawks about coming to, right? As you said, a week later, you're now working for the Seattle Seahawks. That's a pretty big jump.
Well, I had started out as a ball boy for the Seahawks when I was 17. They had training camp outside of Spokane in a little town called Cheney, Washington, and I grew up an hour from there. So I grew, it wasn't a reach for me to go there. It was a reach for me that they gave me an opportunity. So I was some long-haired kid with a perm, and they hired me as a ball boy when I was 17 years old. And how about this? 20 years later, I was the boss. So every year I came back. I worked all through college. Every summer during Linfield days, I went back and worked there. So they kind of knew of me. They knew what made me tick. But it didn't hurt that my last year we won a national championship, went 12-0, had a lot of success, and that kind of carried into the Northwest. And it helped me, without a doubt, it helped me get the job with the Seahawks on a full-time basis for sure.
That's great.
So Randy, when they sold you, to come to Linfield, just trying to get a little more specific, right? So, business leaders, they are often tasked with creating a vision, right? They're tasked with finding that picture that people want to be a part of. It's pretty measurable, in football, when they could say to you, we've been winning and winning and winning and winning, and we want you to be a part of that. And no matter whether you play or not, you're gonna emerge better and be a winner. How about going to the Seahawks, or let's use that as an example, right? They're near and dear to people in the Pacific Northwest. You come out of Idaho, you've been successful, you go to the Seahawks. Can you talk a little bit about the visioning that maybe you brought or created with others that attracts the talent, that creates that winning culture?
Well, I'll be honest, when they hired me full-time out of Linfield to come work for the Seahawks, it was a time of change for the Seahawks. And Chuck Knox had just come from Buffalo. He was the head coach of the Bills. They had hired a new general manager at that time, and they were looking for a young kid in scouting that had a football background that could learn. And because I had been around there, whether it was as a ball boy or as a gopher around training camp or whatever, I used the same attitude I had back then when they hired me full time was that I'm just going to go keep my mouth shut. I'm going to learn everything I can. I'm going to duck behind desks when things start flying, and I'm going to try to make the guys above me look good. And that's as simple as I could make it, and that's fact. I just wanted to make everybody look good and learn the business. And I had spent those 5 summers there in several different capacities. I had spent time in the equipment room. I had spent time in the training room. One summer, our video guy wrecked his car between Cheney and Spokane, so I was the video guy. One of my first years full time with the Seahawks, one of our assistant coaches had cancer and missed 2 months. Guess who they put a pair of headphones on and had to record all the plays and meet with the coaches. And I ended up getting a lot of experience, right? And it came fast. And I was young, but I had a little football background, but it was a lot. And so I just feel like I was fortunate to get thrown in there. And I would equate it to this. All of us have very few times in our life where we can really shine. I just hit on the ones where I could shine. And I did good during that 1 or 2 moments when the spotlight was bright on me. That's just, my makeup's always been like that. So I've been fortunate, but I do think there's, when luck meets being prepared, you're going to have success, And so that happened to me a lot. It seemed like I was always getting opportunities and doing good at it. So I just kind of advanced fairly quickly. And, I learned more the first, 5 years with the Seahawks just by keeping my mouth shut and asking questions and doing any job that came up. I wasn't concerned about job descriptions. I wasn't concerned about really any part of it. I wasn't concerned about pay. My wife and I got married right out of Linfield. And I remember the first job I got with the Seahawks full time was $15,000 a year. And that was a full-time job in 1983. I was filthy rich. Had never had so much money in my life. So I didn't care about any of the other stuff. We both came from this same little logging town. So we kind of came from nothing. And hey, we just used it as she had a job too. And we just used it as a chance to grow. So it was fun.
Wow, that's so great.
It is great. But so many of the things you just talked about are an openness to learning, helping other people look good. Those in some ways are kind of like values based.
Right.
And especially as a, new kid on the block, that's not what most, first time, people that are employed by the Seahawks tend to do. So can you tell us a little bit about your own personal values that kind of have, served you well?
Well, again, I think it comes with, and I kind of play this up a little bit because my life was pretty simplistic, right? It was a little logging town with no stoplights. My dad was the mayor. So there was my claim to fame. My dad was the mayor for a couple of years of this little town, but really that's where we develop our values and is really from our parents. And I think, and then if you can develop a couple core strategies in a way that you can communicate effectively and make others look good, I think you can carry that about as far as it can go. And that's still things that even 40 years later, I strive to do. I don't think my leadership style has changed, whether it was, washing cars at my dad's car lot or running $1 billion NFL team. I think my leadership skills were the same. You just kind of maneuver them a little bit to the environment you're in. I was always one of those guys that people got behind. There's certain maybe personalities that attract people to get in line. And so people trusted me. They wanted me to lead. They wanted to be led. And I was never the best player at Linfield. Whatever Patrick says, that's not true. I maybe played good, but I wasn't the best player. But the guys kind of followed me, right? I might have been one of the better leaders.
Right.
And so that I think has served me well in the real world. And even though my whole life has been spent building football teams, it's really been spent building organizations because it's more than the 53 guys on your team. It's the trainer, the equipment guy, the marketing guys, it's the PR people, it's everybody that you come into contact with. It's your relationship with the head coach, and the way those dynamics all kind of play out over time. So there's a lot more to it than just finding good football players and bringing them in and acquiring talent.
Yeah. So like, okay, now you're speaking to our listener because our listener goes out and acquires top talent. They may pay top dollar to attract and retain really good talent, but it's more than just assembling them and putting them at their desks or putting them on the field. How did you engage all of those different departments? You know, a CEO has a marketing department, a sales department, they've got product development, they've got all these different functions within the company. How do you get them all pulling in the same direction?
Well, I think it is a conscious effort for sure, Patrick. I think there are a lot of days, and this just gives you an example of where my mind was. When I was a GM in New Orleans or Miami or even Seattle, there was a lot of days where I would come home at night and I would tell my wife, I'd say, I don't think I did anything today. I don't think I got anything done. But you know what my day was spent? Communicating with all those people that you just said. Mm-hmm. I'm working the whole building all the time. I'm making sure those people have what they need. I'm clearly not the smartest guy in this building, but I want those guys to make me smart. And so I hired people that were really good at what they did. And then I just managed the people as well as I could without, by letting them do their job. So it's a conscious effort. I whatever the business, whatever the team, whatever the situation I've been in, I've always been one about people. I think it's a people world. And I struggle with leaders that aren't good people, if that makes any sense. And
yeah,
so that was kind of my style, right? I wanted to make sure everybody knew, one, the direction they were headed, two, that there's a lot of ways to get there, and three, that I cared in what they were doing. So that was just my style.
That's
and
great.
To this day still is.
Yeah. How much of those conversations, what did you learn? And you think about how much of that communication's two-way. So you're communicating, here's where we're going. I'm here to help you. What did you learn in the process that maybe helped you, again, get the organization pulling in the same direction, or maybe shift your own vision or direction for the team?
One part of it is that, and this doesn't happen very often in the National Football League. I was with the Seahawks for 20 years. So I was in one spot. So I saw a lot of people come and go. And I learned a lot by maybe knowing how not to do things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you can gain from that. I worked for several coaches, 2 or 3 different general managers, and I tried to take something from all of them, and that includes ways not to do things. And so I was lucky to have others pay the price for their mistakes, and I learned from them. And that's just the way of professional sports, right?
Yeah.
And I did a lot of learning the hard way. I gained experience from others, not so good, the results. And that helped me a lot as well. But I just think everybody has to be authentic to their own style. You can't be somebody else. You can't be a leader that, hey, because my office was next to Nick Saban for 2 years. That doesn't mean I want to be like Nick Saban, and that my style isn't going to work like that. In fact, It was really a good cop, bad cop when we were together in Miami. That's just, he might fire someone and I'd try to find a way to rehire him the next day because, that's just the way I was. So I just think you've got to be authentic to yourself. I don't think you can have a specific criteria in line as a leader that, hey, I got to check these boxes today.
Yep.
I got to do this today, and I've got to do it in this fashion. You know what? I think you got to be yourself. And I think part of that is the way you communicate, and that's got to be authentic. And I don't think you can communicate authentically without being yourself.
Mm-hmm. Randy, I don't know what your responsibilities are outside. I mean, I hear it all, building the organization, but you came from a small town. Your father was the mayor for a couple of years. The value, good values embedded in all that. Some of the athletes that, because I know you did scouting, and I was reading about this whole scouting business. Maybe they call it recruiting, but what do you do, or is it the coach's responsibility? Are you jointly working together? If a kid comes out of a harder background or an inner city situation, they're a great athlete, but they don't have any of that foundational stuff that you kind of grew up with.
It's all part of it, and it might be more important than actually what you see on the field. I think anybody can evaluate talent or be taught to. They can look at the film, they can watch a kid play, they can go through. I can give you a list of 10 things that I think you could probably identify at a particular position of skills or criteria. the hardest part for me is figuring out what's inside somebody and what makes them tick.
Yeah.
How that competitive level, how their heart works, how their effort works. Now, I can see some of that on tape, but I think to get inside people, that takes a special trait as an evaluator. In the professional world, Leb, it's the scouting side, the general managing side is kind of separate from a coach and from the coaches. We build the talent, or we build the team in conjunction with the coach's criteria that they want to employ. So that, and then once we get them, then we kind of turn them over to the coaches to develop and bring them together. But I would say this, I've worked under coaches where the coach has been the boss. I've worked level with coaches when our responsibility and level of leadership was the same. And then I've been the coach's boss at another organization. My style, my criteria never changed.
Yeah.
I always worked together with him. If we couldn't agree on a direction to go, guess what? We picked a different lane. I'm not going to go a lane that you're going to be against, Patsy. And 3 months later, when it doesn't work out, you may say, hey, Randy, you'll be more apt to be on board if you're invested, and we build to a consensus. So that's the hardest thing, I think, in building a team on the football field or an organization. You've got to build some consensus, or at least that's my style. None of us are smarter than all of us, okay? That's just a fact. And so I always want to build consensus to a point. I have no problem making a decision at the end of it, but I want to hear everybody out. So that's what we did, Leb, in building these teams and organizations. We all would have some say in it. Yeah, maybe I had final say, but I want to have everybody involved. We build a job description for anything we're doing, and then we fill the criteria easy. I see so many companies, so many NFL teams, so many really sporting, professional and college groups not even know what they're looking for in people, in players. You've got to have a job description if we're going to fill it. We just can't go find the fastest guy or the fastest talking salesman or whatever. We've got to build a criteria and then fit exactly what we want. If we don't have the right fit, that's our fault as leaders. So that's really what we do at the NFL level, is we really hone in on our criteria and the job descriptions that we're looking for. And that comes with a quarterback. It comes with a PR person. It comes with anything. Let's build a criteria, and I guarantee you I can find what you want.
Now, does that criteria that you build, does it have as much of the the how, the soft skills, as it does the what, the ability to throw a pass, the ability to hit a receiver on the run, or the ability to run a good route? How are you looking for and weighing both of those equally?
Well, I'd like to say equally, but I don't know. I don't want a bunch of choir boys. I like a few fast ones too, So we're going to find a way to build a group that has a little bit of everything, though.
Okay.
That has the ability to process information every day, and I want to know what I'm getting every day from the employees as much as I can. I don't want this. That's not what I want. I don't care what the organization. That would drive me crazy. I want this every day. I want to know what I'm getting from everybody around, and that includes the football team. So some years at the end of the year, I would say, you know what, our football IQ as a whole was shaky this year. We were too up and down. We really struggled to manage certain things that hit us during the season. So we would intently go out and try to find some additions that were even keel personalities, some people that really processed before they spoke, those kind of tools and criteria. Now that's above and beyond the physical skills that they all have to have. So right. I think you got to combine them. You obviously have to have physical skills to play at the level these NFL athletes are. So I'm assuming we're in the same ballpark physically. Then we really dive into to separate talent based on what's inside them and some of those core values that you guys have mentioned. Mm-hmm. I hope that makes sense. I feel like I'm a little over.
No,
it makes a lot of sense.
So much.
Yeah,
great.
I think it really crosses over to our business listeners as well, right? Especially having tight criteria, know what you're looking for, know what you're hiring for, have a job description. I totally think it crosses over. Patsy, you were going to say something?
Well, I hear that at the end of the season, you evaluate to see how much ups and downs there are, and we all know in professional sports as well as organizations that it's really critical to monitor that on a daily or moment by moment basis.
Right.
Because you're going to get some dips and some valleys. So how did you approach that? Managing that even keel that you wanted that maybe wasn't always even keel.
Well, I think it's a little easier in professional sports because we get to have a final exam every Sunday. So there's only 17 of them, right? So it's easy for us to figure out processes, but it's a production-based business. So there's 17 finals, and we're going to, they're pass or fail every week. So it doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be exactly like we draw it up. We just have to do things better than the other side. So that's I think easier to measure. I always thought that I had buddies that were in certain sales jobs or other businesses, and sometimes their goals of sales and what they do can be measured, but ours was measured in front of everybody every Sunday. And the difference is then radio, TV, all the media people talk about it all week long, these kind of jobs. So I would like to have had a chance to have a job where they didn't critique you all week long at a national level or at any media, platform. So that makes this a little different as well. So you've got to, I think in my case, as the boss, I always had to use the media as a tool as well. So you have to factor that in to part of your leadership and team building. But for the most part, we all would talk every day about what we were doing good, what we weren't doing good. We really couldn't wait till the end of the season, Patsy, to answer your question. We had to make adjustments along the way. There's nothing worse than sitting around. Now, sometimes our hands were tied because we just couldn't find better. These guys that run fast and jump high don't grow on trees. And so we just can't find a replacement or do things better all the time, but we're aware of it. And so we're always striving to make that better. And we have objective measurements in front of us that we saw last Sunday that we're going to try to change before next Sunday. So it is a job of adjusting all the time with a professional sports team.
Wow. Can you talk about that outside noise, right? The outside media. I think a lot of CEOs are used to the noise. When I say used to, that's part of the job. So in your case, sports talk radio all day long, right? You've got fans that are probably letting you know how they feel about things. How do you weed through all that noise to figure out what's useful, and how do you protect the organization from, what others might be saying?
I think it again kind of goes back to what I talked about earlier. You have to tune a fair amount of it out. You really can't be a part of it. There are some times when, to this day, I'll be watching ESPN and they're talking about this team should draft this guy or they should do this. I have to turn it off because I feel like I'm walking through 8th grade study hall, right? I mean, this conversation is, when I had 40 years ago, these guys were talking, it's so crazy. What are they saying? So you have to tune that out. I've always been one of those people where I welcome the input to a point. I don't want everybody to think like me. I'm okay with a different angle at something because it might make us smarter. For example, here's one specific, Patrick, about it. When we have a college draft, it happens every year in April, and we spend 12 months a year getting ready for this college draft every year. It's the biggest day for a professional team to acquire players that you have in a yearly basis. I would spend 99% of the time preparing our criteria and how we see these players fitting in for us. But the last day or two of this process, I would then invite everybody who had an opinion or could find a mock draft or could find somebody else's work. I would invite them all in the draft room. And I want to hear it all, right? I want to hear the craziest thing from ESPN. I want to hear the goofiest thing that CBS Sportsline came up with 2 weeks ago. I want to hear it all because maybe there's something I hadn't thought of yet. And what it does was, I don't think you can always tune it out. Like I originally said, you have to tune out a fair amount, but the parts you let in, I think can make you better. It's going to help you focus on some areas. It's like sending out a whole bunch of Army men and they come back with intel, right? I want the intel. Now, it may not change what we're doing, but it might change the planning of what we're doing. So I use the media a lot as a tool for this. And the craziest ideas would come back and we would have fun with it, but hey, it might change a little bit of how we see things based on the intel we're able to gather. So it's always a juggling act between tuning the media out and using the information as intel.
Yeah.
I have a double question, Randy. So I read a quote from Mark Bruner, NFL scout, and he talked about you going to every organization you went to, the culture changed. And we do a lot of work. We're really passionate about organizational culture. So last week we had a guest who talked about intentionally creating a very fun culture. Can you talk a little bit about culture from your perspective, and also infusing the right amount of levity or fun while you're working really hard to create this, championship potential team?
Yeah, I really do believe in culture, and I appreciate Mark saying that. I mean, Mark is an ex-NFL Pro Bowl tight end, so he's been around. He was with the Steelers for 15 years, so he understands culture. So that means something. Again, it kind of just comes from my values of growing up, in that I want people to be heard. I want people to understand that they have value, and I'm going to press them to grind hard, but we're also going to have fun at the end of the day. So we're going to understand how hard it is, but they got to know that there's some daylight at the end of the tunnel. I learned this from Mike Holmgren in my time in Seattle with him. He was the head coach, and he was the best I've ever been around, Jeb, at, I guess we can say this, he kicked their ass. He got after them. But 5 minutes later, these players were hugging him. And that was awesome. That is coaching. That is leadership. That is everything you want. I don't care what the business. If the leader can do that, and the employees are back in there laughing 5 or 10 minutes later, that's the culture I want. That's what the culture is. Sometimes we would go to, well, when I went to New Orleans, for example, after 20 years with the Seahawks, I became the GM of the Saints. They had gone through losing years. Their fans wore bags over their head. You guys might remember, it was awful. They were called the Aints, right? And the employees in the building, I could palpably feel how dejected they were when I got there. They had been beat down. They had been called every name in the book forever. And it was like, I think they just wanted to be led, but they wanted to be pumped up. They wanted to feel like we could get over the hump. So we did some crazy events. We would have a staff golf tournament where we'd all take a bus out to some little place out in the bayou where Bobby Boucher, was, I swear, lived down the next road, and we did a bunch of things like that to where it brought us all together. I brought 5 guys with me from the Seahawks when I went to the Saints, guys that had worked for me in my time in Seattle. So that helped me with culture big time, because they knew how I wanted to do things. I couldn't spread all the word in the new building the way I wanted to, but I know these other 5 guys would help me as well. And we were close as brothers, and I brought them all, and some of them are still there. Mickey Loomis is the general manager of the Saints and is the longest tenured GM in the league. He was my assistant, and we were together for 15 years with the Seahawks. So the culture thing it's real, and it has to change, but it comes from everybody. It's not just the leader. It comes from the coaches. I think any dialogue, any building of consensus, it all adds to it. But at the end of the day, employees have to feel valued. And I'm going to use this as an example of the other way. And I'm not trying to jump on the Chargers, but I was with the Chargers 10 years, my last 10 years in the NFL. This was after the success of building playoff teams in Seattle and in New Orleans, and then going with Nick Saban to Miami for 3 years. Then I went to work for the Chargers for 10 years. And this is the opposite of that culture. And this is what I call working in the dark. I went there for 10 years and never had a conversation above me about football with anybody in the building. Ever. 10 years. So you tell me what kind of culture you want to be a part of. Never had a conversation with them. Had success. Patrick named some of the things I had accomplished, and I wasn't looking for credit. I was just looking to be part of a team, but never had a single conversation for 10 years with anybody above you about football after having 30 years in the business. So that's the opposite of culture, in my opinion. the culture is real. And it's really how you feel as an employee or how you feel as a group together that builds culture. Now, in football, it includes the players. It includes the equipment guys. It includes the trainers. It's a bigger group. It is a giant group of culture where you lay it on the line every Sunday. So I think it's easier to build culture in those competitive situations sometimes than it is in the real world of business, you know. But I do think some of the same values carry over.
Well, absolutely. To drive home that point for the listener about the state of the Saints when you got there or before you got there, I looked this up, the 4 seasons prior to you joining, their record was 3 wins and 13 losses, 6-10, 6-10, and then again 3-13. So 4 consecutive pretty bad losing seasons, but like a history of that. The reason I point that out, you show up, you bring a team of people with you from Seattle to help very smart, jumpstart the culture. You've got allies. I think some leaders think when you have a bad culture that it's because you have bad people. Right. How much of in that turnaround, because it was the very next year, your first year there, you went 10-6 and won the first playoff game in Saints history. Not only was it a big win, you beat the defending Super Bowl champion Rams, so that's big. How much of that transformation involved changing people, or was it really changing the environment and then those bad people suddenly became good people? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. And I think there's a little bit of everything involved in that. I do know that we replaced several. Sometimes when you go to an organization, there are things that you just find incompetent, right? And it's not necessarily anybody's fault, but it's been there forever. And you just want to rid it. I want to rid everything about that. I'm done with that. We're not going to do it that way anymore. And I have no problem making those decisions. But a third of the people I always found, and I did this 3 different times, a third of the people were really good. They were just looking to be led. They're actually really good teammates. They're really good people, and they just want to be led. And I would take that first couple months to sort it out. One of the first things I always did was I would have that all staff meeting, and I would just tell them, because I was at the Seahawks, don't forget, for 20 years. We had leadership changes 2 or 3 times. So I saw how leaders came and go. And for me, it made it simple. I let you decide if you're going to be here or not. I don't. When I go to a new organization, they get to decide. I'm just going to watch. You decide. I'll figure out what's fake, what's real, what's not. You know, I don't have a problem with that, but you get to decide. I'm not going to handpick the guys I'm going to replace or the gals I'm going to replace. That's not, you get to decide. So I made that point. You have a chance here. It's like when you transfer schools, you have a chance with a fresh start to make the future whatever you want. The idea is to improve on all the things you screwed up the prior time and do it better this second or third time around. Now, if you continue to screw it up, obviously we're going to replace you. But if you want a new lease on life and you want to do it the way we all want to do it, jump in. I'm going to credit you with that, and we'll find a way to make it work together. So I think that you've got to manage these different pools of people, Patrick. Don't get me wrong. Some people have to go. There's just incompetence. When you go 3-12 or 4-12 and 10, and there's incompetency in the processes, probably in how you build that team. So we shed our share of that. But there was a lot of people there that were good. And then there's a lot of people there that I kind of let them decide if they were going to be around or not. So there's a third, and a third, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's great.
So Randy, this is the frustrated CEO, and you're very upbeat and positive, and you've had great success. Can you share any of the things along the way that frustrated you the most?
Well, I relayed one to you for 10 years with the Chargers.
Yeah. Okay.
I felt like I never was heard and was never asked. Therefore, I was never really involved in what was going on. Sometimes your employees and other people just want to be asked. You don't have to listen to me. Just kind of hear me out a little bit, you know, and that's all. So I think that was part of it. I'll say this. I had 25 years in the NFL before and 3 years at ESPN before Nick Saban hired me with the Dolphins as their GM. He was the head coach, but I was the GM. He was the boss, and he hired me to come there. I had some success before I got there, had done things kind of my way up until then. But he forced me to have an open mind even after 25 years. And yeah, maybe he beat it into me even after the success I had. But it was the best thing I ever did was open my mind, because my 2 years with him there showed me that there are better ways to do it than even the ways that my successes had survived it. I had done well, but he even made me better. And I often said he made me way better at my job after 2 years than I had been at the 25 years before that. So I think we always have to be open-minded. We always have to be willing to listen. I don't care, how successful you've been in the past. Don't close your mind to thinking that you have the only way and the only answers. You've got to listen. We've got, and that maybe goes with young people. You've got to listen a little bit to them. But even people that have been around a while, I always like to have a veteran, experienced group with me as much as we could. I want opinions. I want people. I don't want a bunch of yes people around me that just agree with everything I said. I don't think we're getting anywhere with that regard. So again, I don't know if that answered your question, but that just kind of made the style that has done well by me.
Yeah. Thank you. So the people above you, are we talking about owners? We're talking about, I'm trying to translate it over to maybe you've got a
general managers, coaches, owners,
and Tanker as board of directors, and
when I was with the Chargers, I was the national scout. I should have said that to start with.
Oh, okay.
I was down the pecking order. I was not the boss. In fact, there were a couple layers ahead of me. So I took a lesser position. They moved my family and I back to Seattle, and I scouted the whole country for them. So that's where the disconnect was. I took a much lesser job on the structure to go with the Chargers, having had a lot of success at the top seat for those 25 years. So
thank you.
Yeah, that may makes more sense. So
I have another, and then I'll be quiet for a moment. So a lot of organizations and sports teams as well deal with adversity, right? And it could be, for some of our clients right now, it's been the supply chain, this global supply chain issue. Now it's inflation. Yeah, it was the pandemic. Really difficult things to deal with. Excuse me. Can you talk a little bit about resiliency in the culture, or some of the things that you may have infused in the culture to help overcome some of the adversity that we all face, whether it's business, sports, or even our families?
Well, I agree with you. We always face adversity, like you mentioned, families. There's no more adversity faced than in an NFL schedule for 17 weeks. But I made it a point, Jeb, and I think I'm still like this, and probably my wife and daughter come back at me a little bit with this, is that every time I walked in that building, you could not tell if we won or lost the day before. Every Monday morning when I walked in there, I was going to be like this. And I made sure the coach was doing the same thing, because guess what? Everybody fed off of us. If we showed up on a Monday after getting our butts kicked and started throwing things around, everybody would be on edge. It's not what I want. We're not going to be productive if we're worried about the boss's reactions, And sometimes my job was, as the general manager, to keep the coach and the coaching staff even keeled as well. So I would walk in every Monday the same. And the same can be said for walking in a locker room after a game where we just lost our best player to a knee injury. And we had already lost a guy at this position the week before. So now we're down to playing neighbor kids, I swear. And now we have no chance. But you know what? They're not going to see me sweat. They are not going to see me sweat. We're going to have another guy in line. He'll be here Tuesday, and we're rolling on. So I always prided myself on that even keel. My favorite coach and favorite leader in the NFL forever was a guy named Tom Landry, head coach of the Dallas Cowboys for years. He wore the top hat. You very seldom ever saw him smile, and you never really saw him get mad. And that was my goal, was to be like that, so that everybody knew what they were getting out of Randy every day. And I just think it went downhill from there, and everybody kind of felt that and knew that they weren't going to get whacked over the head if we didn't play well on Sunday. Now, I held people accountable, don't get me wrong, but I prided myself on being the same every day. I remember this. You guys will get a kick out of this story. When I was in Miami, after Nick Saban left, I stayed one more year. We played a game in London against the Giants. It was the first regular season NFL game ever be played in London. So this was, 20 years ago, maybe 15 for sure. And I remember we had played the Giants and lost a tough game, 13-6. We had to, by 6 a.m. the next morning, have all our luggage down in the ballroom because we were flying back to Miami. I remember it was a really hard fought loss. We had the ball on the 3-yard line. All we got to do, we had 3 plays to score. We're going to win the game. We fumbled the snap. The Giants get it. You'll appreciate this, Jeb. They didn't go on to win the Super Bowl that year, but we had them beat in London. So the next morning, we take all our luggage to this ballroom, and it's 6 a.m, right? And I remember Wayne Huizenga was the owner of the Dolphins. And I was down that day. It was all I could do to even muster it up. I just got through telling you how I prided myself. Well, that was one day that I kind of let it slip. And I remember taking my luggage down there. I kind of threw them down on the floor, and I just must have had a look about me because Wayne Huizenga came from across the ballroom over to me and said, "Hey, Randy, how you doing?" He said, "Let me carry your bag." And we had to take it to the edge of the doorway. Wayne Huizenga is the only, and you might know this, the only person in the world to start 3 companies and take them to Fortune 500 status. 3 different companies. So he was pretty good at what he did, right? But he saw something in me across the room where I was dejected, down in the dumps, and I showed it. So I let my guard down. And he said, "Hey," he put his arm around me and he said, "We'll get it right. We'll get it right. I know you're down." I have been mad at myself for 15 years for showing that dejectedness.
Yep.
And
That's
that
a great story.
kept me going after that. This guy founded 3 companies that went to Fortune 500 status. Only person in the world to ever do that. Auto Nation, Waste Management, and Blockbuster.
Oh my gosh.
Good companies to start and take to the limit.
Yep.
That's great. So as we round third and head to home, should we, is it time to get practical?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. So listener, you've been with us for a while, or maybe if this is your first episode, you are just hearing for the first time. At the end of every episode, we do something called Let's Get Practical, because if nothing changes, nothing changes. What that means is, okay, interesting. Thank you, Randy, for bringing cool stories and wisdom and insights. But if a listener turns off and does nothing to impact his or her organization, then have we really done anything? So when you think about the conversation we had today, or Randy, anything we didn't ask you that is just pressing on your mind, what would you tell a listener, a CEO, a senior leader, that 2 or 3 things they can start doing tomorrow to make inroads in terms of building a winning organization?
Well, the first thing I would do, Patrick, to answer your question is I would make sure I am listening to the people around me. I just think listening is a lost art in our world today. I don't think people listen. They might listen, but they don't hear. And there's a distinction there. You've got to listen and you've got to hear what others are saying. And I think that builds culture, that builds leadership, that builds trust with your people. So I think listening is the biggest thing where we need to check ourselves and make sure as leaders we are listening to the people around us. They need to be heard if for no other reason.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Yep.
Any others?
Well, I think always, and I go back to the same principles. I'm a consensus builder, so I am going to hear opinions, and this is kind of listening, but I want to build consensus. I want to know that everybody had some say in it, and it's easy for me to build consensus when you're talking about picking players all the time. So that's my world, right? Building a team. So I get to build a team of 100 people every year. So I've had a lot of experience picking players and building consensus. And it's like we talked about to start the podcast. If we don't agree, probably going to go a different direction because I want us to agree for the most part. So I just think try to build a consensus as a leader. That's another real key value for me.
That's great. Patsy, what do you got?
Criteria is critical. Build your criteria and then hire to it.
Yeah. Build a job description and make sure everybody knows what it is. We can find it if we know what it is. And the other thing is, if everybody knows what that criteria is, everybody can be searching for the same thing. So it just keeps us all on the same page, on the same level, if everybody's looking for the same criteria.
So another one is kind of the flip side of the listening one, is that people's voices matter. Let them know that they matter. It's hard to listen if people aren't speaking up. So
Right.
Thought that one was, and be open to learning, even if it's hard. You also had said, no matter how successful you've been in your career, in your life, keep an open mind and be willing to listen to others.
Without a doubt. I'm going to leave this and be on a call with all of our coaches from our Seattle XFL team. And that's the first thing I'm going to tell them. A lot of these guys have been around football their whole lives. I just want to make sure they're open-minded to everything that's going to happen, because it's going to be a crazy ride. And if we get stuck in our own trenches all the time, we're never going to expand our mind to get better at anything.
Yep.
That's great.
So Patrick, what do you got?
Okay, let's see. So we kind of ended with Randy. You were saying it's your demeanor as the leader. Your demeanor, you set the tone for the rest of the organization to follow. So if your lows are too low, then the rest of the organization loses heart with you. And then you talked about Wayne Huizinga. If you, as the leader, if you see anybody on your team who seems to be struggling, pick them up, right? Carry their luggage for a little bit. I think that's that was valuable. I love this. The hardest part of evaluating talent is not what you can see on film, but what you can't see, what's inside. And so really working to understand what's inside, the work ethic, the values, the heart. And then you were saying, let that inside be the differentiator when what you see on the outside is the same, right? So when all the talent looks the same, let the inside be the differentiator. If you want to build a winning organization, if you build, you led with it in the Linfield example. If you have a winning organization, this is the impetus for the leader, the listener to do this, right? Why do you want to build a winning organization? When you build a winning organization, people will leave their other commitments, their other places to come play for you, to come work for you, just like you did, changing your commitment from Pacific because you wanted to be part of a winning organization. So it does attract top talent. I'll pause. Leb, what do you got?
Okay, quickly, communicate to ensure that people get what they need. It's a people world. Okay, when there were no cogs in the wheel. I interpreted this one as value reading body language, like Wayne did with you, right? So there's something to that. It's important to learn about what not to do, as well as what you need to do. And two others, welcome input from others, just like welcome it. And the last one is be calm in the face of adversity. There's value in being even keeled. Yeah, Tom Landry.
That's good. Randy, any more you want to add?
No, it's been fun. I've enjoyed it. And hopefully our listeners can gain a little bit from it. And hey, I'd love to come back again some other time. Seems like we could talk for a day.
You bet. No, it's great. Randy, so talk briefly, what are you doing now? If anybody is interested in the work you're doing, talk about what you're doing and then how they might get in touch with you.
Well, I have a consulting website, which is kind of all things football. It's called MuellerFootball.com. And I write on a blog there with a lot of interesting things that people might find regarding the NFL for the most part. But there's some leadership things that come across with that. And I'm currently the player personnel director for the Seattle XFL team that's going to start play in January. So we're in the process of building a team to do that. And it's a spring league, kind of like a AAA to the NFL. But I love the team building stuff, and building from scratch is kind of what floats my boat. And that's what we get to do. We get to build these organizations from scratch. And so those are the big things. I do a podcast every Saturday on The Athletic. It's called the GM Football Show. And Mike Sando, the Athletics national writer, and I do a podcast and have for years, once a week on the Athletic platform. So I do that and appear on a ton of radio stuff around the dial, whether it's Fox Radio or NFL Radio, or I do a lot of media stuff that kind of keeps me going. I'm a film watcher, Patrick, so I spend a lot of time watching NFL film and video. So it's nice to be able to talk about it.
If a business is interested in having you, I mean, do you ever speak to organizations about leadership and like, is that something that a listener could reach out to you for?
Yeah, no problem at all. I'd love to do it. And they can go to my website and contact me through there at Mueller Football. I enjoy that kind of stuff. I love to talk leadership outside of football, just like we've done. Yeah. And if there's any value there that a company might have or want, I would surely do it. Obviously, I'm a Northwest guy and live in Seattle and spend most of my time in the Northwest. So, hey, there might be a connection there that somebody can make that we can all gain from.
Great. Patsy, Leb, anything else for the good of the cause?
No, just a big thank you.
My pleasure, guys. I really enjoyed it.
Really
thank
inspiring.
you. Listener, thank you for staying with us to the end of another episode. Hope you enjoyed this. And you can download this episode's Let's Get Practical, the list that we just put together here at the end of the show. You can download it from our website at thefrustratedceo.com. Please like and share this episode along with all the others. And be sure to tune in again next time for another episode of the Frustrated CEO Podcast.